Hi, everyone. Welcome back to All Things Real Estate. I'm Terry LaJoy, your host from Keller Williams Coastal and Lakes and Mountains Realty. My co-host, Sean Sandville with Oak Hill Acquisitions. And today we have freelance paralegal Aprille Barker here to talk about doing some estate planning and different things that you do that can help our homeowners out there. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here today.
Yeah. So first off, tell us, who are you and what do you do? And just start there.
Sure. As you said, my name is Aprille Barker. I am a paralegal, and I have been in the legal industry for over 30 years. Hard to believe, I know.
That's a long time.
And I started my own business back in 2018, and I kind of morphed it in 2024, where I decided to go out and help people who need help with preparing documents. Mm-hmm. And I'm not an attorney, as we established, and I do not provide legal advice. But what I do is I provide information and education.
Nice.
And so one of the things that really interested me was estate planning. And in doing that, I help individuals fill out their forms, basic wills, powers of attorney for financial and healthcare, and trusts. Very basic information that I provide. And if I feel it's something that's completely out of my wheelhouse, or that someone's asking me questions that I just can't answer, I'm more than happy to refer them out to any attorneys that might be able to assist them. I have several attorneys that I can refer to.
Awesome. I love it. So a lot of the people who watch us, they're either investors, they're homeowners. And so when it comes to real estate, a lot of people don't realize that what happens if something happens to you and you say, like myself, single individual, I have a house, what happens if I pass away and I don't have a trust or I don't have documents in place? What does that process look like?
So if you don't have any documents in place, specifically a trust for your home, it has to go through the probate process.
Okay.
And that can take a long time to do that, because once you've passed away, if you have a will, if you have, that's what you decided to do and not to do a trust, that will have to go through the probate process. And that takes time because, of course, after you've passed away, there's the grieving process. Then they've got to find your will. Then they have to probate it through whatever probate court for the county that you're living in. And just to get that process started, you're looking at potentially, 3 months or so before you actually get your appointment, your executor or your administrator to overrun your estate. And then you have to put your house into probate, which means you're looking at maybe a year before you could actually sell the property, potentially.
Okay, so I have to stop you there.
Yes.
You just said that could take a year.
Yes.
How are the payments being made if there's a mortgage on this house in between?
Somebody is going to have to try to keep the upkeep of that home. And a lot of people can't afford to pay for their own home as well as the house that they're trying to preserve, because you're trying to preserve the asset for the beneficiaries. You don't want the house to go into foreclosure.
Right.
Yeah, so having a trust avoids that, because it does not go into probate when you have a trust. And so who you name as your successor trustee would be able to capture your home and do whatever it is that you have designated in your trust and how you wanted your house sold. Most people, depending upon the property that you have, so let's just say you have your primary home and you have a lake house.
Okay.
With the lake house, it might be in your family for 100 years. And if that's the case, typically what the individual will list how they want that house to be preserved. Is it going to stay within the family? It would be their wish and intention that it stays in the family, because maybe a family member couldn't afford to keep it.
Right.
But if that's the case and they had to sell it, they would be able to do that without having to go through the probate process, because the deed is titled in the name of the trust.
Okay. And if it's in a trust, is there a time period for when they can sell it, or is that an immediate thing?
Usually, sometimes what people will do is maybe say 90 days to 6 months. But the trust, I believe, it is valid for 21 years. But I think that would also be a question to either, check with an attorney on, or, do some of your own research online. But most people don't wait that long anyhow. They typically want to sell it pretty much right away. I'd say most people do it within, I bet, anywhere from 3 months to a year that the house is sold. But they can do it in their own time.
Okay.
And it just makes it so much easier, because the house is going to be transferred either to a beneficiary or sold. It usually spells it right out in that section of the trust of how they want the house to be, or other properties, additional properties to be kept, maintained, or sold.
Okay, amazing. And you just said something I'm going to circle back to because I didn't know. You said there's a time limit on a trust that they expire.
Yeah, I think there's a thing that's called perpetuities. It's I believe it's like 21 years that you can a trust can stay in existence.
Okay, that's good to know too, because if somebody has done one a long time ago and they haven't touched it, they might want to take a look at that.
I believe that what we're referring to is after passing.
Oh, okay.
After passing, how long the trust can stay in existence.
Oh, okay.
During your lifetime, you can. What I love about a revocable trust is that during your lifetime, you can use that trust while you're living, or if you become incapacitated. But also, it's valid upon your passing.
Okay.
So where your will is only valid upon your passing.
Okay.
And that's the big difference between a revocable trust and a will. And I think most people enjoy having a revocable trust because you can amend it at any time.
Right.
Or you can revoke it. So if you have properties and all of a sudden you don't have any properties and you have nothing in the name of your trust, you can absolutely revoke that trust.
Okay. Interesting. See, I've already learned something new today. Sean, do you have any questions?
Can you kind of explain the process of like how somebody would approach you for helping out with the trust, so to speak?
Sure. So do you mean if somebody wanted to call, say for example, somebody called me and said, hey, can you help me with a trust?
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Somebody like myself. We'll use me for an example.
So if that's the case, what we do is I send you out a questionnaire and you fill it out because all the information is your information.
Perfect.
And I just take your information and put it into the forms. Specifically, like when we do that, we'll do like powers of attorney. And you don't necessarily need an attorney to do your healthcare power of attorney or your financial power of attorney, because really what we're doing is we're getting your names and we're plugging that information into the form.
Okay.
Really same thing with a trust that I do for you, because again, how I handle my trusts is really you're giving me the information, I'm plugging them into a form. Most people who come to see me are people who would typically can't afford an attorney, or they'll do it through LegalZoom. This way, if I'm with you and I'm helping you through the process, giving you information, guiding you, educating you on how things should be inputted, then we just take that information and plug it right into the trust. If you feel like there's some questions that need to be answered and I can't answer them for you, you're always more than welcome to take your forms and contact an attorney to have them review them for you, just to make sure that everything is to your liking and specifications.
Okay.
But really, I'm getting all the information from you. I'm not giving you information. You're giving it to me. That's that's the beauty of working with somebody such as myself, where you really kind of know what you want. I don't like give you information about tax consequences. I'll advise you to a CPA or an enrolled agent or a financial advisor. And really what we're doing here is we're just kind of filling in like a couple of little sections that talks about how you'd like to have your property distributed. Because if you yourself are an investor and you have your primary home, and say you have a house out on the lake or a house out on the beach, I can actually help you transfer those properties into retitling them with the Registry of Deeds.
Okay.
And sometimes I'll have people come to me who are already established and have their trust already all set. And they'll ask me if their house is in trust. And so what I'll do is I can do research for them through the Registry of Deeds, double checking to make sure. And sometimes the property, believe it or not, is not in trust. So I will help them transfer their deed into the name of their trust, because that would totally negate the process of having your trust. The purpose of it is to put your property in trust so that one of your biggest assets doesn't have to go through the probate process.
Understood.
Does that help?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
That's cool. And just having somebody, and I've known you for a long time now, and you are so good at just taking information and making it easy to understand, because most of us are not attorneys. We're not paralegals. We don't know the law. And just having somebody that you can talk to and help you understand that information is huge. And you do that super, super well.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. There's another area that you focus on.
Yes.
And you want to spend a couple of minutes, because we both deal with people that are going through divorces and things like that, which brings us to the other side of your business, that you work with as well. So give us some information about that, because I know nothing about that world.
So I am also a family law mediator for the state of New Hampshire. And meaning, when I say the state of New Hampshire, meaning I don't mediate family law cases in Massachusetts, Vermont, Maine. It's just New Hampshire. And so if a couple's going through a divorce, one of the pieces of information that we really talk a lot about is their property. And that's a tough one, because nobody wants to leave their house, especially if it's been, you know, a 25, 30-year marriage. They don't want to sell their home. They want to stay in it. It's nearly paid off. It can be very painful. But even though the house might be paid off or close to it, they might still not be able to afford it for whatever reason. You know, there might be a lot of debt that needs to be paid. There might be, maybe the wife isn't working, or the husband might not be working, depending upon who's going to get the house. So there's a lot of information that goes into that, and having somebody who is an investor or a realtor would be wonderful to have that like in my back pocket, to be able to help to explain to people that not to worry. You know, we've got sensitive people here who can help sell your home and keep the process, you know, easy as can be during a very difficult time. And so that's a difficult one. It's because, of course, divorce is very emotional, and it's very difficult to go through, and nobody wants to part with their things. Everybody wants to keep all of their investments, you know, their financial investments, property investments, and it's a difficult one to have to kind of divide and navigate that out.
And sometimes what I see is you have a couple, they own a property, maybe they haven't owned it for very long, but one of them still wants to keep it. And so for them to buy the other one out, I mean, that's a part of the negotiation, right? Is who's going to, if they both want the house, who's going to keep the house? How is one party going to buy out the other party? Coming up with that value that they're going to assess to the properties and things like that. And that all goes through part of that mediation and the determining who gets what. Whenever there's a divorce, it's who's getting what and what does that look like?
It's difficult, because I'd say probably 8 out of 10 times you end up selling the house. Because one person, unfortunately, in today's world, it's difficult to, you know, be in your home and manage it all on your own. It's good to have either a spouse or a partner help you, you know, maintain that home. And the reality is that there really isn't going to be a lot of money there to be able to do that. And then the bummer of it is, if it is something that's a relatively new home, and you've only been in there for a few years, the equity might be very low as well. And so you don't really have a whole lot to divide there either. Or if you have a lot of debt, you know, paying off that marital debt, you can do that through the sale of the home.
And that happens a lot as well.
It does. Yeah, it does. Or even going through divorce and the house is in foreclosure.
Yes, that happens.
That's also a very difficult one, because not only are you going through the divorce, but you're also losing your home. And so you're not even going to be able to capture, you know, an asset or receive any kind of money from that at all, because it's going through foreclosure.
Well, and that depends, because
that's where I can come in and help out.
Exactly. I was going to say that's where we come in very often is when people are going through those situations and maybe there's not a lot of equity, but there are ways of keeping it out of foreclosure. And that is really, for any couple, kind of a double whammy, because a foreclosure is one of the biggest things that people go through. That's like the hardest thing to go through. The other side of that is a divorce is also one of the most difficult things to go through. And now you put those together, in navigating that it can be really hard. And like having somebody like you that can be behind the scenes and just educating and kind of guiding them, and also knowing when is it time to get an attorney involved. Because there are things that you can help with, and then there are other times that I'm sure you look at people and you're like, nope, this really needs an attorney.
Right. Yeah. So the good news is with family law, you know, mediating. I've actually had 2 successful mediations this past week, which has been wonderful. Congrats. Where people actually come in and we're going through the process, and I help them get to a point where they can try to negotiate. And it's great. I really enjoy that piece a lot, because honestly, both parties are going to be unhappy, which is a good sign of a mediation, right? Because you don't want one person feeling that they get everything and the other person gets absolutely nothing.
Right.
So helping individuals through that and really kind of talking things through and figuring it all out, and having people like such as yourselves, an investor and a realtor, is wonderful to have for me, to be able to provide that information to my clients, the clients I'm helping mediate through their divorce process, because sometimes they don't know where to turn. Do they need an appraisal? Sometimes they don't agree on the value of the property.
Right.
And maybe having a fair market analysis would be helpful so that we can have an understanding as to what the value of the property is.
And that is a lot cheaper than having an appraisal done.
Right, right.
So, and that's the other thing is, trying to save people that money, because if you hire an appraiser, you're gonna pay for that appraisal, and it's gonna be a full price appraisal.
Right.
Versus with a market analysis. If there's a charge, it's usually very much lower than with an appraiser.
Right, exactly.
Most realtors don't charge for that.
Right, exactly.
So.
Right. So, so helping getting that information, that's like another piece of the education, right, that we were talking about, having information, education, knowledge is power, and having that is great to provide to, no matter what it is I'm doing, whether I'm mediating a divorce case or helping individuals, talking with them about their estate planning and their process and educating them on what all of that means.
So I have a question, because I've run into this a couple of times. You have someone who wants to get either a trust or wills done and kind of get their affairs in order. Mm-hmm. And they're right on the cusp of the capacity to do it. How do you handle something like that? If somebody, like, most of the time they're able to make those decisions and function normally, but maybe Alzheimer's or dementia is starting to kick in, but it hasn't fully kicked in yet. How do those situations get handled? Because there's a lot of people, family members, who are facing that, with their parents or grandparents even. And how does that get handled where, like, most of the time, because I dealt with it with my mom, for a long time, she, for the majority of her time, she was able to make decisions. Mm-hmm. But you could see there were other times that you're like, yeah, we're not even going to have this conversation today because she's not in the headspace to do that.
Right.
Any thoughts on how families can work around those issues?
Yeah, so I think that when you're finding that a loved one is going through situations where, you think they're losing their cognition, I think it's probably a good idea to go and talk with a physician.
Okay.
And there are things in, like, if whether it's myself or a law firm, attorneys who are working with clients, it's hard for us to make a decision as to whether or not, they're losing their cognition because we don't really know them all that well.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If you see someone who's older, if you ask them questions like, who is our president, what's today's date, although that might not be a good one because sometimes I don't remember the date.
Yeah, sometimes I don't remember the day of the week.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, but if you're talking to them, I think you can kind of tell, whether or not someone's actually impaired or not cognitively. But I think if you have like a son or a daughter or a relative coming in with, grandparents, parents, and they're concerned about their cognition and they're saying, oh, they're failing and their dementia, typically I ask, well, why do you think that? Are you recognizing something in your parent or loved one on your own? Or have you actually talked with their physician to find out whether or not they're losing their mental capacity? So that's a tough decision to make. Mm-hmm. So I really recommend that you bring your loved one to their physician. And sometimes that can also be very difficult because there's cognitive tests and Alzheimer's tests. And I think there's like different tests that can be taken to determine what they have. But if they are full-blown dementia, there's really, you really can't help them prepare with their estate planning because they don't know what it is that they're agreeing to or signing, better yet. Mm-hmm. And that might not hold up if someone were to ever contest it and saying, well, they weren't in their right mind at that time. And so at that point, either I think one of two things you should absolutely do is go see your physician or go to an attorney that might be able to help recognize if is somebody failing cognitively.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is most people, if not all, because there's never an all for anything, but most people really should be taking action sooner rather than later. It's much better to get all your affairs in order. You can always change it later if you change your mind, but getting something in place now, whenever now is, so that you don't have to worry about, heaven forbid, an accident happens or you lose your cognition or like there's so many things that can happen that make you incapacitated and unable to make a decision.
So true.
So I
recommend don't wait. You know, whether you want to come see me or you want to go to a law firm, I highly recommend it because, you know, estate planning, nobody really wants to talk about estate planning because you're talking about your mortality.
Right.
And people don't want to think that. And when you're in your 20s, you're like, I got plenty of time, right? 30s even so. I think the biggest thing for people is when they have minor children. I feel it's super important because in your will, you'll designate a guardian for your child. If the husband and wife pass away, who's going to take care of your children? And because that is something that does have to go through probate. You have to obtain guardianship over the minor child. And if you already have somebody listed in your will, it makes it so much easier to go through the probate court and establish that guardianship. Because whoever it is gets that guardianship, there's a background check that needs to be done. And they'll need it to put the child into school and also for medical purposes. So estate planning is, I feel, very critical, not only for preserving your real estate, but there's so many other assets that have to be preserved and aspects of your estate plan that should be looked at and preserved.
So question, if somebody has just a child or many children, and you just said that has to go through probate, custody has to go through probate, what happens to the child in between?
Well, they can stay with their relative, no problem.
Okay.
It's just really what it is you've got to get the guardianship because you need it for legal purposes, such as registering for school, going to the doctors.
Okay. But in the meantime, they can go stay with the family member. Okay.
Absolutely.
I
Yep.
just wanted clarification on that.
Yeah,
because I was
absolutely.
like, what
if you name
happens
somebody
between?
in a will, it just goes that much faster. You
Right.
know, because it's in your will, it's expressed as to what it is that you're looking for, and it just makes it so much easier for the transition.
Okay.
Versus having people, are you going to take the child? I don't know. Are you going to take the child? This way it's clear. And when you're doing your will, it is the hope that the individual who is doing the will go to that person and say, hey, I want to name you as my guardian for my minor child. Will you agree to do that? So hopefully no surprise.
Perfect. We're going to be wrapping up. Okay. Is there anything else that you do that the folks who are watching should know about?
No, I really love helping people. I like to see them get their questions answered and really educating them and informing them as to what it is that they need to do. I love helping individuals through their divorce because it's not an easy process to go through. And so I really like that part of it. And also just helping individuals who would otherwise not be able to afford to go to a law firm or go through LegalZoom and just want to come to me to ask for information. I'm always happy to give it.
I love that. And you've answered tons of questions for me over the years. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
If somebody wants to reach out to you and find you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
They can contact me through email, which is abarker.paralegal@gmail.com. They can also get me on my website, Aprille Barker Paralegal, or they could call me at 603-341-6873.
Awesome. Aprille, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful.
It's been fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
I love it.
Me too.
All right, everyone. That's going to wrap us up for today. We look forward to seeing you back next week.